What's going on, everyone? Welcome into Bayou Bengals football. So, one key guy for LSU, I touched on this in the short, is Jacoby and Gilroy this year for LSU. Jacoby Gilroy, if you rewind to high school, this guy was a really dominant player. I mean, 4-star recruit. I really liked Jacoby and Gilroy's game. So, we talk unsung guys, and we talk guys that we want to emerge and take another step. So, if you think about national title teams, for some reason this example came to mind. If you look at Auburn in 2010, now everyone thinks Cam Newton, all the things he did. Obviously, Cam Newton was a crucial part of the 2010 Auburn national title team. But if you looked at that Auburn team, there was one thing that really stood out. There was one player that really emerged. It was Nick Fairley. So, not saying Jacoby and Gilroy is going to be as dominant as Nick Fairley, but what I'm thinking is, if LSU does something special this year, Jacoby and Gilroy could be the guy that does that. And Gilroy has the talent, just does not quite had enough opportunity. This year, especially in week 1 with Mason Smith out, Gilroy has an opportunity to really show his skill set, show what he can do. He's a guy that's got a big personality, hearing him on some of the interviews. So with his big personality in game to back it up, or a skill set to back it up, and then given the opportunity, so we'll see if he can make the most of that. So keep an eye on Jacoby and Gilroy, number 90, defensive tackle for LSU, guy that could be one of the unsung heroes if LSU does something special this year. And even if they don't, I think Gilroy could have a really nice season for LSU. So, I was watching some Mason Taylor highlights, and, Mason Taylor, when you just watching his highlights, you get an appreciation for this guy's game. Mason Taylor, I forget, was not a big-time recruit at tight end. Like, you watching, all his ability really flashes at tight end. Ability to adjust to the ball. He's got good hands. He can go over the middle. He can make catches with defenders on him. All the abilities there for Mason Taylor to be one of the, I think he should be the number 2 tight end in college football next year. So, super pumped to see how Mason Taylor does. Mason Taylor, one of the best players on their offense, and an excellent tight end. So, we'll shift to, let's talk. So I talked Paul Mubanga. Paul Mubanga is projected to be like their 3rd tackle this year, a 3-star recruit. But this kind of goes back to a point that I've been talking about with LSU, how well they've done in recruiting, that they're essentially number 3 tackle is a very highly, not as regarded player, he's only a 3-star recruit, but a very highly talented player with a skill set that really stood out on tape. So that just goes to show how well LSU has done in recruiting. And I'm super, super excited to see, this is one thing I've been talking about, who's going to emerge on offense for LSU. That's what I'm super excited about. Who's going to emerge on offense of the freshmen? Zalance Hurd, his name keeps getting thrown out there a lot. So Zalance Hurd, Caleb Jackson, 2 guys to keep in mind. Zalance Hurd, when I initially watched his high school tape, I was impressed, but I wasn't blown away. Now the more and more I watch of Zalance Hurd, the more I'm saying, wow, this guy, he's a guy that, this is why I probably should watch tape on. I probably should watch highlights on a guy and then go back at a different time and watch him again. Because for some reason I went into watching Zalance Hurd thinking he was going to be overrated. I don't know why I had that. I don't know why I had that mindset in my head. I think it was because I watched Womack first. And I'm not trying to take shots at Womack saying he's overrated, but I think he is a guy that he does have some traits that really, that are exceptional. I think that really boosted him in his rankings. I think that he's a guy that is going to come back down to earth a little bit in college, meaning that I think he could be a good player, but not a great player. But the point I'm trying to make is, or I guess what I'm trying to say is, I watched Womack, and I thought Womack's a little bit overhyped in regards to where his ranking is, a 5-star guy. So I kind of went in with that preconceived notion when I was watching Zalance Hurd. But you watch Zalance Hurd, he is a powerful offensive lineman. A guy that can really knock guys to the ground. In pass protection, he wants to finish you. He wants to knock you to the ground. Run plays, he really just wants to drive you completely out of the play. Now, he's not a super like free mover. He's not like super agile. He's got a little bit of stiffness, but his strength is so superior. I don't think it's really going to matter in the college level, even and then eventually in the NFL level, because the guy's strength is just so exceptional, and you combine that with the aggressive and explosiveness and the strength in the hands and the ability to want to finish plays and the competitiveness. And I can't really say he competes consistently because I only watched high school highlights, but the high-end traits of what I saw from Zalance were super impressive. So Zalance, an excellent football player, one of the top offensive linemen come out of high school. He's got a chance to do some really nice things. You keep hearing his name being thrown out there by the coaches that he's doing a really nice job. So Zalance, a guy to watch for. Does he crack the top 5 starting lineup? Is he out there against Florida State? Does he start at some point this season if other guys are struggling? Or does he, if guys get banged up, is he the first guy that fills in too? And does he have the versatility to play? Or do they trust him to play guard and tackle? It said in Brian Kelly, it sounds like in practice they're playing him at right tackle, but certainly has the versatility to play guard, I believe. So, yeah, keep an eye on Zalance. He's going to wear number 53, just like in high school for LSU. But yeah, I know I've talked the secondary a ton, but I wanted to Ashton Stamps. So Ashton Stamps, I think, is just a really cool story. And LSU, I'll say this, even though the kid has not played a single down for LSU, I think LSU should be thankful they got a guy like this, because you look going into this year, and you had a deficiency at corner. So with that being known, obviously you can work the portal, but I think they understood what they were getting with Chestnut and Alexander. Now, Zy Alexander, we'll see, he may have a higher upside than people think. I think he does, but based on what we've seen at the FCS level, I think it's safe to say he's going to be good, but there is that slight question mark. I sound hypocritical because, I say I'm not worried about the adjustment from FCS to SEC, but, it's such, to me, it is still a little bit of a roll of the dice that he's going to have a high upside to be, the elite corner, just because it is, just because we haven't seen him in the SEC quite yet. Now, you could say that's the same way with high school, but in high school, some of these guys at big time, those prep academies, they are playing against a lot of other true D1 guys. At the FCS level, even though Alexander has the ability, there's a lot of those guys are just, it's nowhere near SEC level or NFL level for that matter. But back to the point with Ashton Stamps, to me, so you bring in a guy like Ashton Stamps, a guy that really wanted to be at LSU, I think, which is awesome, but a guy who is going to work, is devoted. See, he's bulked up, added 20 pounds, so a guy that's devoted to get better is just super awesome. And to me, this is cool that you can go out and get a corner that could potentially start for you as a true freshman, and you didn't even have to do it in the transfer portal. You could just do it by you could just bring him in via scholarship. So yeah, Ashton Stamps, a 3-star guy, but one of those 3-star guys that at this point I've scouted enough guys to know that when I turn on the tape, and all the abilities there for him to have success at the SEC level. So I really like Ashton Stamps' game, and he's a guy that I'm really going to be focusing and keying in on this season. But yeah, so I'll keep talking about this. I know I've talked about this a lot. I know a lot of people are talking about, but Mason Smith, I'm just dying to watch Mason Smith play this year. It seems like, at this point, it seems like we're just starved as LSU fans to see Mason Smith play. Because, I'll say this about Mason Smith. He's the real deal where, number one, he's already being pegged to be a top 10 pick. But what's funny about Mason Smith, and I was thinking about this last night, you know a guy's good when he plays. He's heading into year 3 now. He's only played like one season and missed all of last year, essentially. And then he's into his redshirt sophomore year, basically like a junior year, where he's only played one season as not even the full starter, and people are talking about how good he can be. It's funny with some guys, they end up being true busts, but like some guys play and then get hurt, and then people say they're a bust just because, when they play, they didn't really show enough for people to really have hope that they're going to be good. But Mason Smith is such a good talent that even though he's played very little, people are still hype and are pegging him as a first-round pick. I think that's what's cool about Mason Smith, and that's why people are starving to see this guy play. And to me, Mason Smith, it could turn into, it kind of smells like the Jalen Carter situation. I'm not saying that he is, I'm not saying he's going to do something along the lines of drag racing, but it kind of reminds me of the same thing where Mason Smith, say he comes back after the Florida State suspension and just tears it up this year. Does Mason Smith become that top 5 pick? And is he a guy where every NFL team is just, drooling to get this guy? But that could be the case. Or he could go top 5, but there are some people saying, you start hearing the draft rumors, like, is he a bad dude? They start coming out with these questions. They tend to do this to a player every year. Jalen Carter was him this past season, but that was, well warranted. Micah Parsons, you saw in the 2021 draft. So there's a player every year that's really talented, like the last few years, Micah Parsons, Jalen Carter. But there is question marks surrounding them just because, the media just likes to do this for, things to talk about. And, the GMs or these GM scouts, they just want to know as much as they can, obviously, before they invest a lot of money. But yeah, Mason Smith, that's how he is a superstar talent, because has not played a lot of football, but when he has just made a huge impact. Like, I watched the Kentucky game 2021, Mason Smith, you really get an appreciation for how dominant he was. He's one of those guys where, you can tell a guy's going to have success in the NFL and college. Like, a good indication is if, he just looked different. He looks different in high school. When I watched his tape, it didn't look like he was supposed to be out there. And I mean that in a good way. Like, he's just far more bigger, stronger, more athletic, more mentally mature, if you will, than everyone else out there. So, LSU fans know what type of talent this is. And I think the fact that Florida State fans were like, the fact that Florida State fans are saying stuff about this, deep, they know what this means for them. Now, could LSU still, I think, will still win this game, but, it's funny, Florida State fans commented in the video, they were kind of downplaying Mason Smith. And they were right, they did move the ball a little bit when he's in there, but it's one of those things where if you have a guy like Mason Smith, to me, I think, because last year Florida State won the line of scrimmage. Now, let's say this year the line of scrimmage, if Mason Smith played and the line of scrimmage was even for 4 quarters, to me, having a guy like that, he is a big-time, puts you out of field goal range, 4th down, key, crucial sack away from winning the game. Like, these are the type of guys that, you worry about in late game situations when you need a key pass rush. So I think that's where I talk about this takes pressure off of Florida State. This is how it takes pressure off of Florida State. You do not have to worry about, it's a 3rd and long, you need a key drive, you're down a field goal. You do not have to worry about accounting for Mason Smith. You do not have to worry about holding on to the ball too long to give your receivers time to throw the ball, and Mason Smith is in your face. So that's where I think this takes pressure off of Florida State. Also, it would, it alleviates them having to double team Mason Smith, and it alleviates them having to take Harold Perkins, Ovia Gofu, Braden Swinson one-on-one. So, yeah, just wanted to talk some Mason Smith some more. So, yeah, I think all right, so let's just talk about this season overall. So, LSU 10-4 last year. Obviously, they want to do better this season. It would be interesting if I could go in time and just see what LSU regular season record was. I think there's a lot of different ways you would react. I think that, like I touched on, I think Florida's going to be a tougher opponent. Like, I think if you saw LSU lost one regular season game, I think a lot of people would assume it'd be Alabama, but my next guess would be Florida. I think Florida's going to be a challenging opponent for LSU this year. But the SEC is a grind. I think that they have a really good chance starting 5-0, but there is certainly a high chance they could slip up against Ole Miss, Arkansas, Tennessee. That's do they play Tennessee this year? I think that's what's interesting is, that's the thing about the SEC. It's such a grind, and it's so tough that, if LSU, for some reason 10-2 keeps coming to mind, but if they went 10-2, you'd feel like, because I'll say this, I'll guarantee right now, even though I think Florida and Alabama will be LSU's two toughest games, I'm going to guarantee this right now. I think they'll beat either Florida or Alabama. And why I say that is when you have a team this good, this talented, usually they're going to beat one of their two biggest games. They're going to win one of them. So I'll guarantee that they beat either Florida or Alabama. The question is, if I found out, so we kind of went through if they went 11-1. If I found out they went 10-2, I would assume this. I would assume they would lose to either Alabama or Florida, and then they would lose one of the three games against Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. This is Mississippi State. So I would assume they would lose, like I said, Florida or Alabama, and then one of those stretch. Now, they could be Texas A&M. I just think that they're going to beat Texas A&M. To me, Texas A&M, number one, I think that LSU is just a better all-around team, and I think LSU is going to win the line of scrimmage this year, and they're going to be hungry for that game. So that's why I think, because Texas A&M's had their number. So I think them being up for that game and being that hungry, I would assume that LSU is going to win that game. You just have the feel that's a game that they're going to have circled. They're going to really want to win that game. The LSU players, I'm sure they have not forgot the feeling of that Texas A&M defeat. So I would assume that they would win that game. But the schedule, the SEC West, the toughest division in college football. I kind of forget that LSU and Alabama are in the same division. I think it would have been cool one year if we would have saw an LSU Alabama SEC championship. But it just goes to show. I actually think though, maybe it is good for college football that LSU and Alabama play every year, because for a long time, that was a game that just, it still is. That is a game. LSU and Alabama were producing more NFL talent than any other college football team. So I think that game just continues to be a full display of just amples of NFL talent. Like the 2019 game. 2019 was just a excellent example of an Alabama LSU game with just so much NFL talent on the field. And LSU, Alabama, still teams that produce a lot of NFL talent. I think those are the games people crave in college football. Now, Florida State LSU is going to have that, but games with just numerous NFL draft-eligible players are really just so fun. And I think that, LSU, Alabama is going to have a full display of that this season, and I am super, super excited to watch. LSU, Alabama, that's going to be a great game this season, and LSU was just, I think it's cool that LSU embraced beating Alabama. That obviously was a pivotal win for Brian Kelly, but to me, that is like the ultimate. If there's anything that can really get you believing, if you're Brian Kelly, it's that, because that was that was what Brian Kelly was running into. He was running into a Clemson or Alabama, a team where, even though he won't say it, I think that at Notre Dame he really did not have a great belief that they were going to win. But now at LSU, beating them in the first year, that is huge. Because there's a big difference between truly thinking you can do something and then truly believing you can do something. I think Brian Kelly truly believes now that they can beat him. So to me, it's kind of like, if you're it's like a Brian Kelly, they kind of compare, someone compared life to a video game. If Brian Kelly was a character in a video game, you feel like he was stuck on level, we'll call that level 4. Brian Kelly was stuck on level 4. Beating Nick Saban in Alabama was what he needed to get to level 5. Now, if level 6 is the top level, then the next step is Georgia. So I think Brian Kelly knows this. I think that's when you officially know that they are the Kings. Now, if LSU didn't meet Georgia this year, Georgia just fell off, then, and LSU won the championship avoiding Georgia, I think that I don't know if there'd be questions, but I would really have that, I'd have that question kind of in the back of my mind, like, how would they have matched up against Georgia? Now, if they lose enough games to not be in that position, then you would assume they're just not as good, up to par. And, but to me, I really think that, LSU, now, I'm sure there's a hunger to go, or I'm sure there's a hunger, and there's kind of that thought that Georgia is the next step in the video game. They're the next level to defeat. So, yeah, we'll see if LSU plays Georgia. We'll see how that goes this year. But yeah, you hope, if you're LSU, you really want Georgia. You really want, it's kind of the classic cliche. If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. That's really what LSU should be aiming for, to get a nice, strong victory over a very talented Georgia team. But yeah, pretty nice night out here, about 80 degrees. The sun's coming out. Yeah, SEC. I enjoy SEC football. I think, up here in the Midwest, the SEC, or, there's passionate fans up here, but there's, the SEC fans are just extremely passionate, which I think is awesome. I think I love how much knowledge other SEC fans have about their school. There's a lot of LSU fans, myself included, just want to know everything about the team, all the things that their players can do, who can play, who can't play, who might emerge. That's what makes this fun, and that's kind of why I've really, done this. I wanted a daily talk, not just following recruiting, because recruiting's fun to follow, but some of these guys, like commits for 2025, these guys aren't going to play for another couple of years. I think there's always things you can talk about. You could always talk about the players on the team. You could always talk about unsung heroes. There's always something to discuss. You could always talk about the skill sets guys have, the skill sets of the backups, the skill sets of the third string, what you like about guys, what you don't, how they performed in certain games. There's always something to discuss with a college football team, and that's kind of the purpose I have behind making this channel. And I wanted to do something every day that fans could munch on, because, I follow Michigan football too. So as a Michigan fan, there's always, I could always talk about some of the players they have, or Jim Harbaugh's legacy, Brian Kelly. I could talk about Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly, he has it's such an interesting coaching career, to me anyways. I think that Brian Kelly would tell you, I think he's enjoyed, deep down, I think he's enjoyed some of the ups and downs as a coach. The 4-8 season at Notre Dame, the challenge of getting Notre Dame winning at a high level after a few years they were just 8-5 above average. I think he would enjoy, the challenge of turning around a Central Michigan, a Cincinnati, turning Grand Valley, a Division II school, into a powerhouse. Being from Michigan, I really, people talk about the legacy and the career, the interesting path Brian Kelly has kind of carved out for himself, starting in the state of Michigan. So, yeah, I think Brian Kelly, it's fun to discuss his career and credit the great job he's done throughout his career. But yeah, excellent football coach. Notre Dame, I was kind of like, I was kind of torn with Brian Kelly after a couple of those years, 8-5 at Notre Dame. I kind of just thought, to me it looks like Notre Dame's just harder to win, but I kind of just thought that, maybe he's just not a guy that can really win big, if you will. I just thought he was, maybe, I guess an example would be, I thought he was kind of like the Tom Herman, Charlie Strong kind of guy, or Kevin Sumlin, a guy that could, win big at some of the smaller non-Power 5 schools. Like, if you remember, Charlie Strong did an excellent job at USF. I know Louisville's Power 5 now, but to me, I thought that's kind of who Brian Kelly was. Maybe a guy that was going to have success just at smaller school, or win, ability to go win big at smaller schools. Like the year at Cincinnati, where they go 12-13-0 before losing to Florida in that Sugar Bowl. So yeah, I thought Brian Kelly was going to be, I thought he'd be, a guy that balls out against, at smaller schools. But when he got to Notre Dame, maybe that's when he kind of just, that's when it was just kind of, he couldn't reach another level. But he's really done that. But yeah, I got to wrap with that. Thanks, guys, for tuning into this episode of Bayou Bengals Football. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show.